উম, দিগন্ত বাজনী কিবা ক'ব?
ছাৰ নাই
দিগন্ত
দিছোঁৱে ছাৰ
বাজনী কিবা ক'ব?
আছোঁ ছাৰ আছোঁ ছাৰ
ঠিক আছে, ঠিক আছে।
ছাৰ নাই
দিগন্ত
দিছোঁৱে ছাৰ
বাজনী কিবা ক'ব?
আছোঁ ছাৰ আছোঁ ছাৰ
ঠিক আছে, ঠিক আছে।
ছাৰ নাই দিছোঁৱে ছাৰ আছোঁ ছাৰ
ঠিক আছে, ঠিক আছে। Good morning, everyone. We are just waiting for the keynote speaker to join. We have some technical problems. Good morning, everyone. So kindly bear with us. In 5 minutes' time, we are going to start. Keynote speaker to join. We have some technical problems. Good morning, everyone. So kindly bear with us. In 5 minutes' time, we are going to start. Speaker to join. We have some technical problems. Good morning, Professor Amarendra Das. Good morning, Professor Amarendra Das.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay.
Welcome.
I think
Welcome.
this
Yes.
is difficult to I tried it from the mail, but this is joining.
Yes,
Can
yes,
you
I can
join
hear
now?
you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think
Yeah, so we can
what
start
I'll
now.
do, I tried it
Yes.
from the mail. Yeah. What I'll do, I'll keep the video
So we can
off
start now.
because it takes lots of
Yes.
buffering time. Yeah. What I'll do,
Okay,
I'll
okay.
keep the
Okay. So first, let me
yeah,
start the
because it's
proceedings.
taking
Then
time.
we will
Lots of
continue.
buffering time.
Yeah. So
Yes,
let
yes.
me start. Yeah, let me start. So first, let me
Yeah,
start the
because
proceedings.
it's taking
Then
time.
we will continue. Yeah. So
Yes,
good
yes.
morning, everyone. So today is the last day of this month of May's Vigyan Utsav. This 31st May. So all of you know that under the program Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, Ministry of Science and Technology is organizing this event called Vigyan Utsav, in which every month uh, all state science and technology councils are organizing one webinar on a specific theme. The theme for the month of May is future technologies. So I welcome all of you to this session of webinar. And particularly I welcome all the esteemed speakers, our keynote speaker, Professor Amarendra Kumar Das, who is from IIT Guwahati, is a professor of design, IIT Guwahati, and also director of Triple IT Imphal. Then we have with us Professor Vidyut Kumar Sharma, who is professor from Assam Agricultural University, an expert in the field of biotechnology. We have with us Dr. Madhurya Prasad Bora. He is a professor in the Department of Physics, Guwahati University. And Dr. Manojit Ghosh is an assistant professor at the Department of Computer Science and Engineering, IIT Guwahati. So I welcome all the esteemed speakers and all the participants in today's webinar. All of you know the importance of this today's theme, that future technology, which is actually going to govern the future society, governance, all the future activities of the human civilization. We can name any field called agriculture, biotechnology, health, education, design, engineering, infrastructure development. Wherever you go, that future technologies are going to play the key role. So you know this nowadays, the artificial intelligence, machine learning, then use of different gadgets, then application of all these technologies in different automobile sectors. These are now slowly going to be a common experience with us. Once upon a time, when we read all these stories in our science fictions, now many of these things are coming to be reality, and it is directly going to impact our society. In recent times, we have seen the way the cryptotech industries are growing up globally and also in India. Approximately 39% growth in last 5 years, and it is going to play a very important role in our economics, industry, commerce, and also its future impacts in the society is also is a very important issues concern. Many people think that if everything is governed by these future technologies, artificial intelligence, and all this machine learning, what will happen to the employment sector? But I think now people started believing that the new technologies will come and new opportunities will come to the human race. So these are the important issues at the very right time to discuss while the India is celebrating Azadi Ke Amrit Mahotsav. In science and technology, India is now competing with the global players, particularly in technology applications. So we are eagerly waiting to listen from the experts today. So I don't want to delay. I welcome all of you once again to this webinar. Without further delay, I am coming to the first uh, session today. That is keynote address by Professor Amarendra Kumar Das. I have already informed that Professor Das is a professor in the design department of IIT Guwahati. Also, is the director of People IT in Bhal. And his research interest involves the industrial design, rapid prototyping, tooling, space design, facility design, environmental graphics, design for disabled, like that. And he's a very close associate of Assam Science, Technology and Environment Council, particularly in whenever we take some kind of innovative programs, particularly innovation technology generation, any kind of designs. He's the person always we look forward. So I invite Professor Amarendra Kumar Das to deliver his keynote address. Over to Professor Das.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Barua. Nice to be meeting all these people virtually. For the ease of delivery, I'll keep my mobile, your video off because I could see that it's difficult to get the buffering. What we'll do, we'll talk about future technologies, some of the aspects, and then we'll talk about context because future technologies gives us lots of hopes. But then with that hopes also comes the contextability, that what are the contexts that we should look forward and how it is going to help all the people. So why we are interested in these so-called future technologies? What are these future technologies? What we look forward for and what is the aim? So when we talk about future technologies, what we are trying to look forward or what is the aspects most important to do is that it should make life easier and faster. Easier in the things, if we think about living in a rural settings, not with much of a headache, food is available, pristine nature is available, everything, you don't have so much of things to think of. Those lives were supposed to be once the privilege of our ancestors. But then as we progress through civilizations, there came many things, many aspects of things are coming and life is becoming difficult. You can imagine what is the life happening to our elderly people. We are becoming so busy that elderly people after retirement are not getting company, all these things, even they become frail, doing day-to-day activities become difficult. So like earlier days, there is not many people in the household in the time to help them. So we have to think of how to make life easier for even these type of peoples. And when we are running our day-to-day activities, kids going to school, we are going to office, coming back, then food and education, then health, it's becoming very difficult. So main emphasis of future technologies to make life easier. We remember many times we forget our schedule. Some marriages we miss, we meet some meetings, we arrive late in some places. All these things happens because life has become very difficult. And then we talk about making life faster. Life faster in the things is, you imagine today living in a metropolis, you go for 8 hours work and you have to travel for 2 hours to and fro. This is a common situation in places like Madras or Chennai, or you talk about Bangalore, you talk about Delhi, or you talk about Mumbai. This is what is happening, that people spend so much of time traveling rather than doing the work. So people want to make life faster, and you can imagine today, unlike before COVID, to attend this meeting, you must have had to, all of you have to come this place. I also might have come to a single place. Then we have met And suppose you could not physically come, then you would have missed the meeting. Now that is not the thing, so we talk about fasters. Fastest delivery of groceries at households, uh, faster recharge of your mobiles, your telephone bill payment, electricity bill payments, all these things are coming. And that's why we said that we want to make life faster. So it has to make life easier and it has to make life faster. Create new economic opportunities. A technology comes, then it should create new opportunities. When bank was digitized, or you can say a computer was introduced in the bank, there used to be so much of protest by the bank employees. But now what happens is bank employees without computer cannot work today, because things has become so better, so good. Then new kind of services come up, because everybody that in the branch, they are not uh, serving the computers or all these things. So there is a new breed of people who maintains these facilities. So new opportunities came. ATM become possible because of the internet. So when ATM came, a new breed of service came, that people who collect the notes from the bank and feed the ATM machines and service this machine. So when you create new technologies, new things, it also creates new economic opportunities. Today, if you think about virtual payment, GPay, or any other such a thing, you don't have to go to bank to withdraw money. You can have instant money at your wallets and you can pay digital wallet. So that creates many opportunities for retailing. Earlier it used to happen that if you don't have a chance, that you may not be able to buy things, so the store loses the market. Today that is not the situation. So with new economic opportunities, it can create new career opportunities. And finally, everything linked is to sustainable development and practices, because with resources becoming minimized for availability, with the exploding populations, things need to be sustainable. So when things need to be sustainable, you need to have new technologies. Think about mobile telephony and think about the earlier fixed line telephones. Every time there is some natural disasters or anything, first thing to go is electricity and telephones. Today, unless the towers are disabled or anything, you don't have to physically depend on the main lines, the lines coming to your things, or today you don't have to have a cable where from the distributors to your household. You can have the Dix antenna, which was 20, 35 years was unconceivable, and that time it was used to be the future technologies, but today it is a normal practice. Then what else we think about? Now, once you talk about future technologies, people are at this very moment are talking about artificial intelligence. They are talking about machine learning. They were talking about big data. They were talking about cloud computing. They are talking about blockchain. They are talking about virtual reality. They are talking about 3D printing and whatnot. There is many more things. In transportation, we are talking about hyperloops, all. So many of these things are becoming common in our life. Like if you talk about banking, today big data is part of it. So although a few years back it used to be future technologies, now it becoming a common technology. Artificial intelligence are being used even in education to teach people. So it's going to be a technology which will make our life much easier, from face recognitions to passport issue to your medical diagnostics. Everything is becoming easier with artificial intelligence. Cloud computing, and or you even without going to cloud computing, let us talk about normal storage of our data. Now, even if you are having a smart telephones, you know that you can store all your photographs, all your data, WhatsApp messages, all these things in cloud. Now, cloud is somewhere. You don't know where. It is not the physical cloud. Cloud can be anywhere in the world. Data is stored there. As and when you need, you can retrieve those things and use it. So, when it comes to cloud computing, the one aspect of computing machines is that they have to get the data loaded, then computation starts. So it becomes slow. But when your data is already readily available somewhere else, and you used to go for competing, things become very fast. Blockchain, you already know, you pay 1 rupee to somebody, that it's already gets into that. Today, if India's income tax income tax deposits, or say government is getting collecting the income tax and it is better, it is because of the blockchain. You go somewhere, somebody pays you, and then some amount of things is deducted at source, and that gets into the clouds and then blockchains, and that is recorded. So when finally you are trying to submit your income tax return, you will see that those money somebody has given it tax deducted at source is coming into this thing. Similarly, GSTs and all these things are happening. Coming to virtual reality, virtual reality is even during the COVID times, when tourism is suffering, people started creating same experience through virtual reality, that you don't visit. Like, and even if you visit, sometimes you may not be able to go so close to so many things. So virtual reality is coming into our life. Even it is coming to things like that. If you want an architect to design your house, and you actually really wanted to experience that house, architect can make a 3D models, and you can walk through that model and can see whether the house is suitable for you, or if it is designed like that. So this is all virtual reality, and virtual reality is now enormously used for training sophisticated things. Like, people don't have to really go to road nowadays to learn cars. Through virtual reality, you see it in your consoles, and scenes are created across you which are actually emerging, and you will meet all sorts of challenges that you actually meet on the road, but you can navigate it. If you make mistakes, you will get a feedback, but actually you don't make with an accident, like in physical things, killing people or all these things. So it is coming everywhere. Coming about 3D printing, uh, Dr. Borua said my specialization used to be also rapid prototyping. 25 years back, it was not even called as 3D printing. It used to be called as uh, rapid prototyping. Means prototyping used to take lots of time, and rapid prototyping is to make things faster. And it used to be a very sophisticated technology. That was the things, technology was evolving. But today, it is called 3D printing, and 3D printing has become affordable. And like a printer, color printer or normal laser printer, you can afford a small desktop 3D printing, and people are now talking about 4D printings. 4D printings is one aspect which is further ahead, and it is the future technology. In 4D printings, you use the similar type of 3D printings, but you also use smart materials. So those smart materials can retain their shape, or they can sense the shape as per the programs. And these are the technologies. But yes, these technologies are going to benefit us, all of us. It is not that not going to do. But immediate context, it may not benefit everybody. But we have to go ahead with this technology, make it available to common people so that everybody can use it. Now, when we talk about future technologies, immediately everybody has experienced internet, robots, 3D printing, virtual reality, and all these things has become common things. Internet, without internet, now it is difficult. Now what people talk about, people talk, is there internet? And second thing is there charge in the mobile? So this is what our life has become. Anything can be charged in internet, properly used. You can play games, you can learn things, and you can do academic courses through internet. Robots are robots are becoming common also in industry. It is already very common. Like all the uh, electronics components that you find in your mobile is not possible to be assembled by human being. So those are all now done by robots. All the automobiles nowadays is manufactured by robots. They take care of the manufacturing thing. 3D printing, if you talk about a dental surgeon giving you some braces and fixing a artificial teeth, now this whole thing is done by 3D printing. They take the measurements through the X-rays and other aspects, and then they make it in the ceramics and whatever material it is possible, and then they do it, and they put it back into the human being through 3D printing. So it has come into medical. Similarly, it has come to various orthopedic surgeons, even in accidents rehabilitation it can put. Now 3D printing is being tried with creating human tissue cultures. So these things are becoming very common. Virtual reality, as I have told you, big data, I have talked about it, blockchain, I have told. So now we cannot even say this, these are being uh, future. It is already entering in our life. But there are more technologies being developed for use in our future. It is not going to end with this money. If you talk about Hyperloop, yes, flight, the technology to travel in future, it is coming. Now, if we talk about this, is it applicable to all? That is where we have to think. So let us think about contextuals. When you come to contextuals, what is this contextuals and what is this current situation? And then context also has geolocations, where we are located, how it affects us. Then world has already decided on sustainable development goals, removal, removal of poverty, food for all, security for all, health for all. All these things can be made possible properly, but everything has to have a context. And then one big context is your geographical location, where you are located. Now, promotion of green technologies. Now, while you are doing promotion of green technologies, this is also we are taking lots of assistance from the future technologies. Think about IoT. IoT is being introduced everywhere now. Now, this IoT also are helping lots of agricultural process, precision engineering, when to give the fertilizers, when to give the nutrient, when to give a pesticide if at all required, then how to monitoring the watering, then finally coming to harvesting without having human being in the harvester. So those things are also happening. And now coming about green technologies, we are already suffering from climate change. We are suffering from pollutions, and most of the pollutions are attributed to fossil fuels and all these things. So we are trying to get into solar hybrid. Now there is two types of solar. One is solar thermal, another is your photovoltaic. So these are truly green technologies. If you neglect immediately the any pollutions or any environmental effect that those materials has happened on the earth while you are making the photovoltaic cells and all these things. Similarly, people are also trying to talk about electric vehicle as green technology, but there is also situation is that if you are drawing the electricity from the coal-based thermal power stations, it is not 100% green technologies, but you are shifting the pollutions from one place to another place. So that may be another situation. So still we'll have to promote the green technologies to reduce the pollutions. Green technologies is also using geothermal powers for heating it up, then your ocean currents to generate electricity, wind to generate electricity, all these things can be called about as a green technology. And all these areas can create lots of avenues for skill upgradations and employment and new career opportunities. Uh, because you need huge service for it, and those services has to be provided a new breed of service people. Now, we cannot see the things sector wise. Ultimately, we'll have to think for overall economic development of the country. And as this programs is talking about or organized under Atmanirbhar Bharat, it is very relevant to us that we achieve our Atmanirbhar, that is self-sufficiency, through sustainable way, the country is to develop, different regions has to develop, and we have to use the technologies. Now, there is a debate about 5G technology. It's a national security is involved and all these things, but people are also trying to create 5G technology so that we are not dependent upon others. Recent, yeah, I'll be finishing it up. I know that my time will be over. Recent war in Ukraine and Russia has shown us that we are still resilient, but many of the nations, including European Union, who is dependent on fuel on Russia, is having difficulties. So India is better off, and Atmanirbhar Bharat. That's why I want to make India self-reliant and make uh, India use the latest technologies. You cannot think about uh, digital India, what has happened within very short time. But then, what we'll do with these technologies when our major challenges are there? People are already telling that third world war may happen because of the water. Water for drinking and other household activities are becoming difficult. You can understand the situation that Guwahati people are buying water, and in one single day, raining, Guwahati get flooded. So we must know how to handle water. We have to have technology for harvesting the water properly and using these things to make drinking water available to all. Water for agriculture, because when you need waters for agriculture, that time water may not be there, and people are blindly going for deep bore well, and finally water level is going down. So we'll have to think and work on these things so that our population can be fed, agriculture can be done. So for drinking water, we have RO technology, all these things, but we'll have to have technologies itself to have water. So some of the things that we ourselves is trying to do is we are trying to recycle household waters in the hotels and all these things, making into two groups. One is for the water that is used for toilets directly flushing, and the other waters that is used for basins and for taking bath. That second type of waters can be taken separately, then cleaned and can be used for gardening as well as flushing the toilets again. So it required little bit of technologies and some additional expenditures to do that. So those things can be think, and then monitoring can be done through using of technologies, IoT technologies and all these things, that water being recycled is up to standard, that you don't need have to do it. This can also give us sustainable livelihood in terms of making water available for this one. We are already going and seeing this thing, what is happening in hydroponics. Hydroponics is becoming much better situations when you don't have sufficient land. Another type of things is happening is your fuel for cooking. This is a big challenges. Future technologies, none of these future technologies try to address these things. Maybe we'll have to use it for future. Maybe we'll have to use future technologies, make something available, because cooking is a normal process, and when population increases, need for fuel for cooking also increases. If we can make renewable energy, electricity from renewable energy, then even cooking can be converted. Already many people are using inductions and all these things instead of gas. So then these are the areas, like when we want to harvest water properly, already meteorological departments are using water forecasting, but then we need facilities to store water, extra water to be diverted where it is required. So those technologies can be done. We'll have to use the existing technologies for that. And till now, our lots of food is wasted because we are still going for open cultivation. But in places like Israel, etc., they are going for greenhouse cultivations. Greenhouse cultivation in the things that whole cultivable area is protected through greenhouses. Insect and all these things are not allowed to, or not able to go inside, and then crop is actually maintained. We may have to go for that type of technologies also for food, so that food is available to us. And with GIS and all other aspects, though it is possible to find out lots of avenues for utilizing the existing natural resources, and existing of natural resources also means maintaining the biodiversity. Without maintaining the biodiversity, it's difficult to maintain the balance in the ecology, and when there is a loss of balance in ecology, then disasters happens. So I think it is already 11:32. My time will be over. I may like participants to interact if they have anything to ask. So I'll stop my keynote over here. Dr. Barua.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Amarendra Kumar Das.
Yeah.
Actually, in your keynote address, you have covered all the important areas, and ultimately all these future technologies to make our life easier.
Yeah.
That should be the spirit. And I have gone to all these grassroots, down to the earth things also, that recycle of water, providing water, food. These are the issues actually the human civilization wants that future technology should help. So may I have one or two quick
Yes.
questions from the audience? Actually, the human civilization wants that future technology should help. So may I have one or two quick
Yes.
questions from the audience? Anybody has any question? Or we can take at the end also. No issue. Anybody has any question? Or we can take at the end also. So if there is no question, then we are moving forward. So before that, I think we have seen two more important guests with us, Dr. Narottam Sahu, Member Secretary, Gujarat Council of Science City, and Sri Rubikant Prajapati from DST Government of India. Yeah, welcome Narottam Sahuji and Rubikantji. Yeah. And I think some other state assembly councils also joined here. I welcome them also. Now we are moving on to our next presentation by Professor Vidyut Kumar Sharma. Professor Vidyut Kumar Sharma is a professor at the Department of Agriculture Biotechnology, Assam Agricultural University. He is also director of DBT, Assam Agriculture University Center, and ACR National Professor. And he also is a recipient of Norman Borlaug Chair in International Agriculture. He has been an expert member in DBT Special Science and Technology Advisory Group. He is a chairman of Scientific Advisory Committee of Tea Research Association, Tuklai Research Station. And Professor Sharma is a very close associate of STEC, and especially during the drafting of state biotechnology policy, he played a very key role. And whenever we ask for any guidance and support from him, he is always there with us. Everybody knows that future technology is going to have immense applications in agricultural and biotechnology. I invite Professor Sharma to deliver his talk. It is over to Professor Sharma.
Slightly more. Thank you very much, Dr. Borua. Yeah, I'm trying to first, share my slides, then I'll start. Thank you very much, Dr. Borua. Okay. I'm trying to first, share my slides, then I'll start. All right. Very good morning, everyone. I was given a topic like current and future technologies in the field of agricultural biotechnology, which I'm going to present through slides. Let me go to the next slide. Yeah, when we talk about the technologies to have more productions of agricultural crops, obviously, two questions come to our mind. In fact, the scientists working in the field of agriculture, they are facing two big questions. One is that we have to enhance the production in such a way that we have to feed 2 billion additional people, by 2050. And at the same time, that climate changes, you know, the change in climate multiplies, and because of that, the crops, they do encounter several biotic and abiotic threats. So with these two, we have to, keeping these two in our mind, we have to think about producing more foods, not only more foods, at the same time, the nutritional foods. So we have to provide food security as well as nutritional security. Well, that is why that today's talk, I'll address a few questions like whether the biotech interventions is necessary for the development of superior and elite varieties, and also for the development of climate smart crops. Then what are the modern biotech interventions? And one of the modern biotech interventions like genome engineering, which is the very advanced technology now, whether this genome engineering technology can help develop climate smart GM crops. This I'm going to discuss with my own research work on chickpea. And the last point, that is, should we say yes to the GM crops? This will depend on time, of course. If I get time, I'll discuss this portion as well. Otherwise, I'll stop. Anyway, so why biotech interventions to develop elite varieties and climate smart crops? First thing, as I said already, the global population we have to think about. And in fact, we have to enhance the food production by 70% to meet the demand. And because of elevated carbon dioxide levels, it is going to reduce the nutritional quality of crops. And uncertain floods, droughts, heat, etc., cold, etc. These are, challenges for the crop yields. And conventional agricultural practices obviously cannot meet all such demand. That is why, for having an accelerated productions, we need biotechnological interventions. Now, a few or the most important biotechnological interventions are molecular markers for breeding new crops, speed breeding, then artificial intelligence. My previous speaker also mentioned about artificial intelligence, machine learning, etc. And biotech crops or genetically engineered crops. Okay, so briefly, I'll discuss, first few, and then I'll give giving more emphasis on genetic engineering part. So why do you need the molecular markers for assisting the plant breeding? Because molecular markers are present in all the tissues at all stages of the crop's life, and these are stably inherited. And you can see here, say if you cross two individuals and go to the F1 generations, and then to get the recurrent parent, phenotype, you have to go for several rounds of back crossing. And afterwards, in conventional breeding, you'll get back cross generations, and then by phenotypic differences only, you have to select them. But in the case of marker assisted back cross breeding, we can take help of the markers, as I say, molecular markers. And you can see here, we'll select those wherein most of the recurrent parent genotypes or genome will be there, only with a few, say, of a portion of the donor genome. So, the marker assisted breeding helps us screening, large progenies, and then, so that we can go for, within a short period of time, we can have, good number of, screened genotypes. In speed breeding, obviously we can say the line development in speed in a conventional breeding takes 5 to 10 years, because as I have shown in the last slide itself, numbers of the background of the recurrent parent. So 5 to 10 years it needs. But speed breeding means we have now artificial conditions wherein we can advance the generations. Say if the normally a crop can give you, one generation or maximum two generation within a year, but in speed breeding we can have numbers of generations by putting the conditions artificially, that condition requires for the plant's growth and development. So that is how we can reduce the year to 1 to 2 years for the line development, and rest is of course same. So this is what the speed breeding is now very popularly, used by the plant breeders. Of course, it's a big facility, and then for that you need money for developing such facilities. And artificial intelligence, what is artificial intelligence? I'm not going to discuss, but how artificial intelligence can help the plant breeders. You can see here the machine learning can help us predicting the desirable features of in vitro regenerates, and then it can also help us, understanding the genetic stability because of genetic and environment, genotype and environment interactions. Then prediction of parental combinations for the hybrid productions, which parental combinations can be the best one, then to understand the various biotic and abiotic stresses that can crop can encounter. So with all these informations, it is now easy for designing a breeding program. All right. So my main emphasis will be on biotech crops development. Nowadays we call them as biotech crops. Earlier we called them as genetically modified crops. And today, even from the regulatory point of view, we call them as genetically engineered crops, not the genetic modified crops, but rather genetically engineered crops or bioengineered crops or biotech crops. Because this particular technology can help the scientists to take the useful traits in the nature. We can discover the useful genes that are required by the various crops for their improvement. And then these technologies can also help the transfer of such genes into other organisms, for any organism to any other organisms. And it can also help editing the genome. Suppose if we understand the genome, if we can dissect the genome, and if we can identify a specific genes for a specific trait, then even we can go for editing the genomes. All right. So again, what are the advantages of biotech crops in mitigating the climate change? Because these biotech crops can be developed faster compared to conventionally bred varieties. And because of climate changes, there are a lot of new pests may occur, new diseases may occur, and that is why development of varieties should be more frequent. One variety cannot go along, because that will hamper the production because of monoculture. That is why we have to alter the varieties at specific time period. And this is why these biotech technologies can help develop the biotech crops within short period of time. And as I said, because of carbon dioxide emissions, the greenhouse gas emissions, that we have to reduce the pesticide applications. And then with the biotech crops, we can develop the insect resistant varieties or disease resistant varieties, which will help develop a spray of pesticides. So that way, these crops can help in organic agriculture as well. Okay, this is just an example I'm showing you. Here, say, with the biotech crops development in soybean itself in US, if you see, say, permanent fuel saving, say 835 million liters. And, potential additional carbon dioxide saving from fuel saving is, say, about 2,295 kgs. So that is why this is how possible, because genetically modified herbicide resistant crops, as I have mentioned about the insect resistant varieties, we can develop herbicide resistant varieties as well. And these varieties can help farmers to reduce the applications of to spray herbicides, and thereby they can this can help for the conventional for conservation agriculture. Okay, so as you many of you perhaps know about the transgenics development, cisgenics development, and genome edited variety development. So I'm not going to discuss these technologies in details, the time will not permit, but just for your information that what sort of transgenics are already in the field if against or for say to cope up with the climate changes, that is transgenics for abiotic stress tolerant climate smart crops. Say in rice we have drought and salinity and cold tolerant rice already. Then in tomato we have temperation and drought tolerance. Again in rice we have the heat and salt resistant rice varieties. Similarly, in cotton, we have now heat tolerance varieties of cotton as well. Using the genome editing crops, we in Assam or in northeastern region now in our university we have started the genome editing programs in three different crops. But here we have just initiated. But you can see in the developed countries like in US, soybean, rice, potato, they have already been in the field. The genome edited soybean is already in the field for low level of, fatty acids, which we do not require, right? That kind of genome edited plants are already in the field. So one great news from the government of India is that that genome editing. Earlier there, as you know, there are numbers of transgenic lines which are about to go to the field, but because of regulations, they are stuck. Like my own work on chickpea. It has developed the chickpea resistant to insect pest, but we are still sticking in the lab only. We are still unable to put them into the field because of stringent regulations. But in regards to genome editing, now government has exempted the two different kinds of genome edited plants, that is SDN1 and SDN2, that is site directed nuclease 1 type of and site directed nuclease 2 types. Again, I do not have time to discuss these things in details, but for your information, that this is just a few base pairs. This is simply they'll be considered as conventionally developed mutant varieties. Because in this case, SDN1, we just change one or two base pairs, that is simply like a conventional mutations. And here, using the genome editing technologies in the next one, SDN2, here only a part of a gene is introgressed here, not the whole gene cassette, like not the complete gene, but only a part of the new gene is introgressed here, so that the introgressed line can act against the particular insect or particular diseases, or the trait that we require can be obtained. Okay, so these are the two technologies, or which government has said, we do not require any regulations. So this is great news, and then great step taken by our government of India. Anyway, so just to discuss in brief, like how genome engineering research in Assam Agricultural University or genetically engineered genetic engineering research at Assam Agricultural University can help us develop chickpeas resistant to insect pest. As some of you might have listened to me before, so please excuse me if you have already listened to me before, but I'm sure there are many participants who have not listened to me before. So for them, uh, why we have or we plan to develop genetically engineered chickpeas against insect pests, because in chickpeas there are two major insect, one in field is called pod borers. Because of this sometimes we get 100% crop loss, and one during the storage, that is the calostobrucus. This is lepidopteran kind of pest, and this is a coleopteran kind of pest. And because of this, you can see here a lot of holes develop. How these holes develop? Because the insect lays eggs, and then larvae, they go inside the seed, and inside the seed the whole metamorphosis of the larvae or insect takes place, and the adults, when they come out of the seeds, then they make hole. Perhaps many of you have observed these things while storing the not only chickpeas, any grain legumes. If you store at your house for longer, you will see this kind of holes. So this is a big problem at the consumers level, and it's a big problem at the field level. But unfortunately, we do not have any resistant lines of chickpeas, for undertaking any conventional breeding. So my first attempt was to develop, stored grain pest resistant chickpeas. And here I'm showing a Rajma, this kidney bean. So in kidney bean, we found, one, somebody is saying something. Yeah. Hello. Is somebody having any question? Some noise coming up. Yeah. Okay. Um, So in this case, what we found that Rajma contains a specific gene. Rajma means it's a common bean, Phaeolus vulgaris. It contains a specific gene called alpha amylase inhibitor. That alpha amylase inhibitor inhibits the actions of amylases. If we put that, and that is why this Rajma is resistant against those storage paste, because the insects cannot digest the starch there, because they have the alpha amylase inhibitors, so this will inhibit the amylases and insect cannot digest the starch. So what we did, we cloned that gene from Rajma and we introduced into chickpea. So this is the genetically engineered gene, where we have the alpha amylase inhibitor gene, and which was driven by a promoter that will express the gene only in mature seed, because we wanted to express the gene only in mature seed. That is why we designed the gene construct like this. So this is the genetic engineering part, that we have to design the gene first, and then we introduce the gene using a particular protocol, which I'm not going to discuss today. But then after we generate the plants, we have to dissect those plants at molecular level to understand whether the gene is integrated or not. Now, this is a controlled chickpea, then untransformed chickpeas, where we do not have any band, means, there is no gene integrated. But these are some of my transgenic lines, and you can see here, there is either a single band or two bands. Single band means a single copy of transgene integrated, and two bands means two copies of the transgenes integrated. So these are my positive lines. And once we confirm that there was integration of the gene, then we had to confirm the expression of the gene. So this is a Western blotting, this is Southern blotting, and this is a Western blotting to confirm the expression of the transgene. So you can see here in the control, whereas no integration of the gene and there was no expression of the gene. And on the other hand, where there was integration of the transgene, there was expression of the transgene as well. So once we got the expression of the alpha amylase inhibitor gene, then we look for the bioassays, and you can see here these were the control seeds, and these were seeds from my transgenic lines. And you can see here, after several rounds of bioassays in the lab, we found that my transgenic lines were completely protected against the insect. Okay, so with this development, several funding agencies, this was supported by international and international organizations, international funding agencies, McKnight Foundation, USA. So with this success story, we were asked to develop, chickpeas resistance against spot borers, which is a major pest in the field, and then the farmers are really trying to have, spot borer resistant chickpeas. So we started working with that, and as this is the lepidopteran pest, and then we had that information, during the early 2000, that in cotton, the BT cottons were developed, which were resistant against, cotton bollworm. That is also a lepidopteran pest. So that is why we also introduced BT gene into chickpea. I'm not going to discuss this, gene constructs in details. I do not have time, unfortunately. So, we introduced the BT genes, two versions of BT genes we introduced. One is Cry2 crystalline protein gene 2A, and one is crystalline protein gene 1AC version. These two versions were introduced into chickpeas, and these are the molecular dissections, that are presence of the transgenes, expression of the transgenes, and then, with the sudden blot, again, we confirm that integration of the transgene. So after that, the final slide, you can see here that, these are the parental lines, and this is one of my best expressing transgenic lines in chickpea, having the BT gene. And you can see here in the lab bioassays, we found that insects could not damage the leaves of the transgenic lines. On the other hand, the leaves of the parents' lines, they were badly damaged by the insect. So with this, we showcased our technologies. We showcased our technologies, and our technology got transferred to a very famous, seed company, that is Maharashtra Hybrid Seed Company. They bought our technology. There was a ceremonial transfer, in fact. So, I'm pretty happy that being at Northeastern region, we could transfer a technology to India's one of the most leading seed companies called Maharashtra Hybrid Seed Company. And we also transferred our tech, and then that particular, company, now they have, developed, their introgress lines using our transgenic line and the backcross lines they developed, and they did a field test also. And in the field test, we found 25% yield advantage. So which already government knows about these things. DBT knows about these things. Government also knows about these things. ICA also knows about these things. But in spite of all these things, we are still stuck because we cannot bring them to the hands of farmers. But we are still hopeful that one day our lines will go to the farmer's hand. Anyway, after that, we thought that we will transfer our lines to public institutions as well. So, numbers of leading public institutions like, Indian Institute of Pulse Research, Punjab Agriculture University, University of Agriculture Science, Dharwad, then ICRISA, these are international organizations. They have also taken our technology. And these partners, they have also done the integration backcross breeding. And then you can see here the backcross progenies, having the BT gene, they are growing pretty well in content environment. And now we will apply for the field test using the lines that are being now developed through the public institutions. Okay, for information, Bangladesh is not only within the country now. Our technology is now so important that internationally also, because Bangladesh has also expressed their interest to have our lines. Recently we visited Bangladesh, and we interacted with the Bangladesh scientists as well as the farmers, and maybe we'll be transferring our technology to Bangladesh as well. Anyway, I think I have 7 more minutes to go, right? So, I can discuss very briefly that my last part, that should we say yes to the genetically engineered crops for food security. You can see here that, though there are, stringency in the Indian regulations, that, in India, only one genetically modified crop, that is BT cotton, is in the field. Though we have 15 different crops in the pipeline, including my chickpea. The 15 crops in the pipeline, but, only one crop is in the field. BT brinjal was about to be brought to the field, but, the BT brinjal story, right? We didn't allow, rather Bangladesh allowed them in 2013 itself. Similarly, GM brassica is about to go to the field, but, still it is stuck. So anyway, but if you see the global scenario, whether globally they are accepted, you can see biotech soybeans. Biotech soybeans, the total million hectares, if you see, 95.9 million hectares worldwide, and 78% of total soybean is now, genetically modified soybean. Similarly, biotech maize, if you see, biotech on 30% of the 30% of the maize is now biotech maize. In cotton, 76% of cotton is now biotech cotton. And worldwide, if you see canola, 29% of canola is biotech canola now. So there are several others, of course, at a minor level, but, there are several other crops which are also in the field. So this is the scenario worldwide. And you can see here, 71 countries, they have adopted the biotech crops since 1996. And out of that, 29 countries planting and importing, and 42 countries importing biotech crops. And you can see here that, in the US, cotton, sugar beet, even papaya, summer squash, all these things, they are already in the field, mainly for two different traits, either insect resistance or herbicide tolerance, or both. And only in maize, they have got insect resistant, herbicide tolerant, and drought tolerant. So these are commercially released lines in US. But there are challenges, of course. There are challenges. What are the challenges? Like there are certain statements based on mostly on assumptions made against GMOs, which have led farmers devoid of economic benefit. This is a statement I have given, but I have given these statements on the basis of several debates, several publications. I have given this statement, and why? Because what are the statements? Statements are potential risks to human health and environment. There are several other things that may have potential risks to human health. We are not bothering, but we are bothering on certain things, which are actually, devoiding our farmers from economic benefit. Allergy can be obtained from many other things, Then horizontal gene therapy, but this is not that easy, Organic is the future. Many people say, yes, organic is the future. If you think organic is the future, we should support GM because, as I said, insect resistant varieties we have to, spray less pesticides. So, these things, insect resistant transgenic lines will in fact help organic agriculture. Similarly, some people say GM seeds are costly. No, no way. If they are hybrids, that's a different thing. Otherwise, if they are varieties, there is no question of extra cost to be borne by the farmers. Of course, the developmental cost may be more, but for that, the farmers do not have to bother. There are funding agencies, who will fund. Government is there. Government is funding us. Okay, so you can see here the GM foods. This statement you can see the GM foods currently available on international market have passed safety assessments and are not likely to present risks for human health. This is a statement given by World Health Organizations, in 2014 itself. Similarly, in the US, like Food and Drug Agencies, administrations, what they say, the GM food crops grown in the US that have been evaluated by FDA. So once, like similarly in our country also, there is a very stringency, very stringent regulations. That BT brinjal was also passed through the stringent regulations. The GEAC, the genetically approved, and nowadays we call it genetically appraisal committee, genetically engineered appraisal committee, GEAC. That GEAC approved BT brinjal, but we are still unable to bring it to the field. So anyway, for your information, as I said, there is no question of, health hazard because of GM, specifically. There's no single instance, where it has been reported that, by eating GM crops, somebody has died. See, while visiting Bangladesh, I tested, myself and my Australian collaborator, we tested, BT brinjal. These are the BT brinjal there. And we tested BT brinjals, the 4 days we stayed there. And then we are, we are still doing fine. Okay. So what I'd like to conclude, like genetically engineered crops are being developed to encounter biotic and abiotic stresses that are occurring due to changes in climate. Then biotech chickpeas resistant to insect pests are developed at Assam Agricultural University, Jorhat, in collaboration with public and private partners, and we are expected to bring in major change in pulse productions in the country. And biotech crops have been globally accepted for food and nutritional security. So we should say yes to the biotech crops or genetically engineered crops for the benefit of mankind. I must acknowledge the Department of Biotechnology, Government of India, Indian Council of Agricultural Research, Government of India, Indo-Swiss collaboration in biotechnology, Australia-India Strategic Research Fund, Australia, then McKnight Foundation, USA, and of course my parent organization, Assam Agricultural University, Jorhat, and all my collaborating organizations. And these are some of my colleagues, Sumita Sarji, who is now a major player in, legume genetic engineer, she's associating me, and some of my, lab, experts, who the chickpea transformations very regularly, and Dr. TJ Higgins, my mentor from Australia, and Dr. Anand Kumar, one of my collaborators. Then, of course, he is retired now, and Dr. H.C. Sharma also retired now, but they were the main player along with me for the chickpea improvement program, and Bharat Char from Maharashtra Hybrid Seed Company. And these are some of my PhD scholars, some of them are abroad and some of them are still with me, helping us in the lab. So with this, I'd like to thank you all. This is the because of our chickpea breakthrough research, Government of India Department of Biotechnology has funded us for a big center. This is now DBT. Initially, we had it was DBT AU Center, but now it is the DBT Northeast Center for Agricultural Biotechnology. So I invite you, especially the students and research scholars, I invite you to our centers to visit. Thank you very much. So I invite you, especially the
Thank you,
students and
Professor
research
Sharma,
scholars. I invite you to our
for
centers
your
to
very
visit. Thank you very
interesting
much.
deliberation on this agriculture biotechnology, its future applications,
Thank you.
future of our food security. You have given your own example of the chickpea. We know
Yeah.
about being in state council. We know about this development. We are always very proud of your achievement in this area. And the future technology means that we have what to do in biotechnology front, because in the future, in agriculture, food production, the biotechnology is going to play a very important role, and also
Yeah.
in medical science also. So,
Yeah.
may I invite
Sure.
one or two quick questions from the audience?
I have seen Mrityunjay Sinha has
Yeah.
raised a hand. Mrityunjay, please. I have seen Mrityunjay Sinha. Yeah, Mrityunjay Sinha, please. Raised a hand. Mrityunjay, please. You are muted. You should
Mr.
unmute
Sinha,
first.
please unmute yourself.
You unmute and then ask the question. You are muted. You are still muted.
Sinha, please unmute yourself.
You unmute and then ask the question. You are muted. You are still muted.
I think he is having some problem in unmuting himself.
Yes. Any other question? Otherwise, I have given my email address. So anybody is having any specific questions, I would appreciate. You can even write me at any time. You can write me an email. I have given my phone number as well. You can telephone me also, or Jadip can help getting my phone number also. You
Yes,
can discuss, because we have to promote biotechnology, because my center's major role is to promote biotechnology in the northeastern region, not only for the R&D but also for the capacity building. So we are doing that. So any questions, students, especially students or research scholars, if you have any questions, you can ask me through email, you can ask me over phone, you can visit me also. Okay. Yeah.
so thank you, Professor Sharma. So
Thank
now
you.
we are moving on to our next presentation
Thank you very much. Yeah. Bye bye.
uh, by Professor Madhurya Prasad Bora. He is a professor of Department of Physics, Guwahati University.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Bye bye.
His research area is mainly in the field of plasma physics, astrophysics, nonlinear dynamics. Professor Bora is also Director of Internal Quality Assurance Scale of Guwahati University and Regional Coordinator and Director of ISRO Guwahati University Regional Academic Center in Space. And this plasma technology is also now finding so many applications in our day-to-day life. And Professor Bora, I think his presence will help us understand the application of various application of plasma technology in various fields, and also his field of interest, and how the future technologies are going to change our lives. I invite Professor Madhurya Prasad Bora to deliver his speech. It is over to Professor Bora.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Borua. Thank you very much for inviting me to for this nice session. I have really heard the last talk with great interest, and let me share my presentation. Okay, I think it is visible to everybody.
Yes, yes.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So, as Dr. Borua has introduced, I am a plasma physicist, advances in plasma technology. But what I'm going to talk about a little bit more advanced in a sense. What are the future technologies hold for us? Uh, in this context, as you can understand, that there are so many applications of plasma physics in the day-to-day life. but they are one holy grail for all plasma physicists. That is the energy production scenario. So there, in fact, there are so many areas where plasmas are now introduced as a assisting medium. For example, production of solar cells, production of fuel cells, kind of things. But I'm going to elaborate something on which I have worked once, and also it is close to our heart, and also every plasma physicist. And let me just share my slides. And I have designed it to be a little bit non-technical because I know that a lot of cross-disciplinary people will be there. So I have avoided using any mathematics. I've avoided using any equations, and just in a common terms like what one can understand. Because I presume that there will be students and researchers, young researchers, who can actually bite onto the new technologies or new advances in the subject that the world has seen recently. Okay, just to advance it, let me understand what are plasmas. For example, first of all, coming by the last talk on biotechnology, you might also think that the plasmas are something that is found in the blood. Yes, that is true. But here I'm not talking about the plasma that is a biological plasma, but I'm talking about the plasma which is known as a fourth state of matter. So what are plasmas? Now, if you try to answer this, then you will basically find that this is found in solar flares. As you can see that this is the sun, which is actually a lot of flares, and in fact these flares are very big. Several thousands of Earth can actually fit inside one of the flares. So it is so big. It is unimaginably big than what we think about. Then, of course, you know that the aurora borealis, which can be seen from the northern, Arctic Circle, as well as is also visible from the southern Arctic Circle, that is all Australis. These are actually plasmas in nature. Then, of course, you have got lightnings, which you see every day, thunderbolts. These are plasmas. Now, if you talk about the human experiment, then you can see that these are called burning plasmas inside human built machines. This is actually tokamak, which eater, or tokamak, which I'll talk about, which is actually a machine which can find plasmas for generation of energy. Now, having said that, this is like, I'm not going to introduce so much about the plasma physics as such, but let me tell you that what are the plasmas. The plasmas, as you can see, these are actually combination of electrons and ions. The plasmas, as you can see, these are actually combination of electrons and ions. The plasmas, as you can see, these are actually combination of electrons and ions.
You're not audible, Professor Bora.
Sir, I think he got disconnected.
You're not audible, Professor Bora. Hello, Professor Bora.
Sir, I think he
Yes,
got
I'm listening. Yeah,
disconnected.
I'm just coming up.
You're not audible, Professor Bora.
Yes, I think it is
Hello,
up.
Professor Bora. Yeah, now you're
Is
audible.
it fine?
Yeah,
Yeah,
now it is audible.
yeah, right. Okay, so there's a slight pause in the internet connection. Okay, so the
Yeah,
plasma
now you're
stability.
audible.
Now, if you talk about the
Now
plasma,
it is
which is
audible.
actually hot gas of electrons and ions, just like in sun, I have shown the sun there. So plasma stability is equation is always is equation. Now, why it is so? If we can understand that the confined plasma is always unstable. So if you want to utilize plasma, it has to be somehow confined. Now, if you talk about stability, then you can see that we can give a very simple cartoon picture of this. So this is actually inverted bowl, and with a ball there. And if you that give a little bit of flick, little give a kick there, then the ball is going to actually come down to the same point. It's oscillates and come down to the same point. It never goes out of that ball. But in contrast to that, if you have an unstable situation where we might be able to balance a ball in the inverted bowl, then if you give a slight kick there, then it is going to fall down. So that's an unstable situation. Now, the confined plasmas are always unstable. they always try to go away from it. They try to actually mix up with the surroundings, and ultimately they break down. So plasma confinement is a question which is actually plaguing the humankind for last 50 years. Now, why we are so much hell-bent on doing a plasma confinement? Why it is useful? So that's what I'm going to tell you. For example, plasma particles respond to electromagnetic field. Now, how do we confine plasma? Now, you know that plasma particles are electrons and ions. These are charged particles that are found inside the atom or ionosphere or inside the sun. Now, they respond to electromagnetic field. For example, magnetic field and electric field, they respond to that. Now, we can cash on this property to confine the plasma. For example, if I have a current, then I have got a magnetic field, as it is shown by the green line. Then the particles, charged particles, are actually keep on moving in these things. They cannot go out of this magnetic field, and we have got a plasma confinement. That means if you use a magnetic field, then actually you can actually confine a plasma, and we utilize this property to confine plasma in laboratory, and that is how to confine plasma. So what I do actually, we make a torus, to be simple, because this actually there's a cutout view, because it will be actually biting into the tail, so it will be connected. So I have a continuous tube where the plasma is produced and it is being circulated. And then what we do, let me explain that this is something like a major axis, this is like a minor axis, and the plasma is here. So it is like a circulating field. If I try to little bit give a magnetic field, electric field into it, then I will say that I have something like a magnetic field here, and there's a magnetic field here, and ultimately I have a magnetic field like this, which is the result of that. And this magnetic field, without explaining much about that, this magnetic field actually going to confine the plasmas. Now, if I really talk about how these physical principles are transferred into laboratory, then I can talk about the tokamak machines, which looks like that. So here we are showing you a cutout view of a plasma confining machines called tokamak. So here, this is the torus, and the pink color thing is the plasma. Here, these are the black color thing is the magnetic field, and these are the magnetic field. And ultimately, the magnetic field is like a circling around the torus, and the plasma is being confined. There are some nomenclatures. Yes, we can see that these are called poloidal magnetic field. This is called toroidal magnetic field, and poloidal magnetic field, toroidal field. You don't have to bother about that, but this is something like a machine that is built out of this principle that we have seen, and that is being used in a laboratory to confine plasma. Now, if we talk about laboratory, then why should we confine plasma? That is a question. Now, why I'm talking about the plasma confinement, for example. Why should we confine plasma? Now, you know that. Now, comes the question of clean energy. Now, clean energy is a big issue nowadays. Clean energy is a big issue nowadays because everywhere, even my previous speaker also talked about, there's a climate change, there's energy crisis. We want energy without having any footprint. So that's the source that we want to have. Now, we already have some sources of green energy, clean energy. I'll show you what are the percentage of that. But this is the basic need of the hour, because this is the plaguing the mankind, that we need to have a clean energy source somewhere, somehow, if the mankind want to try. Okay, the other speaker which is talking about biotechnology, that is also one of the way, like how to solve the food crisis of the world, how to feed the billions of people. Okay? Now, this is also in one sense how to provide energy into people's house, which is clean. We don't have to talk about carbon footprint or emissions of greenhouse gases. For example, if you go by the clean energy, then if I talk about the current energy production scenario of the world as per estimate of 2021, then you can see that 2021 we have an overall total production of around 25,000 terawatt hour. Okay, there's a huge amount of energy world is presently using. Out of that, you can see that almost 20%, more than even almost about 40% is actually coal. So coal is a huge polluter, but we are almost 40% of the energy is produced by coal. Then, of course, you have got a gas. Gas is like a natural gas, which we are using for your kitchens, then our production thermal plant. These are called, and the oil. Oil means like burning in cars. These are amounting something of the order of around 30% or so. The nuclear is something which is there, something around of the order of 10, less than 10% of the nuclear production, which is mainly coming from nuclear reactors like Bhabha Atomic Research Center has, like Trombe, those are the nuclear reactors that we have. Okay? Then, of course, we have got the hydropower, which is like around 10% or so. Then less than around 5%, so other renewables, bioenergy, solar wind, so on and so forth. So this is the scenario. Now, if we like to see the scenario and analyze that what are the store for us, the solving the energy crisis of the world, then definitely we can forget about oil, gas, and coal, because these are hugely polluters. And even India is talking about phasing out of oil and gas by 2070. Even world has actually called to phasing out by 2050, but India said no, by 2070 we will phase out. So definitely hydropower is limited, so is solar wind, so is other renewables. So only option is the nuclear. But nuclear is a very dangerous, like you talk about, there are two processes of nuclear fission and nuclear fusion. Now, if you talk about nuclear, then we talk about one of the scenario which is using fusion as a source of energy. Now, it is turns out that physically, physics-wise, if you analyze the scenario of the fusion energy production as a fusion, then you'll find that it turns out that the fusion is the most efficient, the cleanest source of energy. It doesn't produce any greenhouse gas. It doesn't produce any radioactive waste, and the sources for this fusion is abundant in the form of seawater or in the form of hydrogen. It is abundant in nature. So we have virtually limitless source of fuel with us if we can harness the source of energy from the fusion. Now it gives me to the next topic, like what is fusion? If we like to tell you in a nutshell what is a fusion, is that there are light nuclei. For example, this is a hydrogen, this is a hydrogen isotope. So this is a heavy hydrogen, like a deuterium. In single hydrogen got one proton and one electron. The yellow, the maroon color is a proton, and the gray color is the electron. And the deuterium, a deuterium has actually one proton and two electrons going out, two protons and one neutrons. Okay, it's going out there, and it's a nucleus. Sorry, it's not electron, proton and electron. And then we have combined them with a great energy to collide to make a fusion. And once we make a fusion, then we have a production of energy in the form of helium-4, 3.5 MeV. And one of the also energy is taken away by something called a neutron, which is actually major energy component. One of the energies actually coming out through 3.5 MeV here, but more than double, almost like a 4 times energy coming out through the neutron, that is 14.1 MeV thermal neutrons. Now, if these neutrons are very energetic, if we can, and neutron is a harmless particle, as you know, that it's not radioactive. If we can trap the neutrons and get the temperature out of that or heat out of that, then we can actually run our boiler or our thermal power station, and we can have an energy from fusion. That is the actual scenario. Okay. Now, if this is what is done, then we can ask where we can find a fusion. Now, that is the next question. Where we can find fusion? In the state of plasma. Now, why the plasma is necessary? Now, we can say that the state of plasma is the environment where fusion can occur. Now, fusion have to occur in a plasma environment. That means if I want to have a fusion, then I need to have a plasma beforehand. If I can have a plasma, then only I can have a fusion inside the plasma. So that's why the plasma physics research is very, very important. Now, if you talk about where in nature one can find the sources of energy as a fusion, now if you talk about that, then you can find the next closest is the sun. Now, the sun is actually having the energy which we are getting. We are actually powered by fusion. It is actually produced at the core of the sun, and that's a scenario that we have. Now, the question is that whether we can build the sun in our Earth. Now, that is the question that we'd like to ask and we'd like to answer. It seems that it is yes, we can build the sun in an art. Actually, there are two opposite principles which can help us in making a sun on the art. Now, if we talk about sun, then we know that why the sun is existing. Now, here we come to basic astrophysics, that it is because of gravity. Now, gravity is so powerful that even if the plasma tries to escape the sun, the gravity is actually keeping it together by keeping it attractive, because gravity is omnipresent. So even if it's very high, even if they're colliding, even if they're trying to expel out, but gravity is pulling them together and sun is keeping in one piece. But the same cannot be true in case of art, because we don't have enough gravity to confine plasma. So we have to think something about something else. That's what the magnetic field comes into. Okay? So what we can do is the tokamak. The tokamak that I have shown you is a device which tries to build the sun inside the art. I mean, on the art. So where we can actually have a vessel, where we can have a magnetic field, and this magnetic field can confine plasmas, and ultimately we can have a fusion or make a sun out of it. So this is the schematic diagram. Like, this is the tokamak or the plasma confinement device, where we will heat up the plasma to such an extent that this will fusion will occur. Then we will extract the thermal neutrons, and the neutron will power the green. Now this is it is now opined that if we place 3 or 4 such reactors in strategic places of the art, it can power the whole world. It is so efficient. So we need not have a single, country-wise fusion reactor. We can have a whole art can have a 5 or 6 reactors, and everybody use power. So that is the scenario that the every plasma faces actually hope for. Now, if we talk about this plasma and recent advances, then we can talk about the International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor, or simply called ITER. And I'm proud to say that we are also a part of that. India is a part of that. China, European Union, India, Japan, Korea, Russia, United States of America are the 7 partners of ITER, which is being built in a place called Paradres in France, which is, you can see the partner here at work, and this is where actually it is built. And actually, I'm proud to say, actually, I was also associated at one time with certain ITER project through my project of plasma physics and fusion research. And this is being built here, and the timeline is around 2050. By 2050, we should be able to demonstrate the burning plasma scenario inside a tokamak. Now, if you look at this present status of the building site, then you can see that this is something in 2018 that is actually being built, and in 2021, 2020, it is something looking like that. And this is what is the confinement, plasma confining. It's a cartoon picture. It's like a diagrammatic schematic diagram. This is where actually they're building. This is where the plasma will form and being confined. This is a cutout view. As you can see that this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 floors of machine. It's a huge machine. Actually, the total volume of the plasma is of the order of 20 Olympic-sized pools. It's a very huge. If I want to give you a size, idea of the size of the things, then you can see that this is a human being. This is the schematic of the ITER tokamak, and this is where actually we stand. So it is this big. Now, we are also proud to say that you perhaps remember one of the founding director of ITER in France was actually late Honorable Vice Chancellor of Assam Science and Technology University, Dr. Dheeraj Vora. Dr. Dheeraj Vora is an Assamese, were educated in Russia and well in IPR, where I was also associated, Institute for Plasma Research in Gandhinagar, Ahmedabad, and he was also one of the director of ITER for some time, about 2 to 3 years. Then he was retired. Then he came as a vice chancellor of the Assam Science and Technology University. Of course, he died of a massive heart attack, I think about 2 years back. So this is what it is the present scenario of it. Okay. Now this is the present scenario. I'll finish. Maybe I have around 10 minutes because I started around 5 minutes late. If Dr. Borwa can interrupt me if I'm wrong, but I'm going to finish within next 5 to 7 minutes. So this is now, I'm giving a popular picture. All of you might have wondered. This is actually from the Spider-Man movie. It's a something, I mean, I'm not telling that this is laser plasma fusion, but this is a Spider-Man movie where you can see that the Otto, the villain in the movie, is actually trying to build a sun inside his laboratory. Now, this is what also laser plasma fusion community wants to build, but this is something the opposite to what I have shown in tokamak. In tokamak, you confine the plasma with the help of a magnetic field and confine it for a long enough time so that fusion can occur. Here it is the opposite. You take a small pellet, something like this, small pellet of deuterium or heavy water, like a heavy hydrogen. It's a pellet. And then you bombard this with terawatt lasers from all sides, and suddenly the plasma happens and fusion can occur. Okay? Now there's a breakthrough. Why I have showcased this thing? There's a breakthrough in recent years. Only in last January, it's barely 5 months. Actually, they have demonstrated the burning plasma inside a laser plasma fusion facility. Now, this is actually what is in Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory in USA, and these are 500 terawatt lasers composite power of it's a huge amount of power. They fire in a small pellet of few millimeter size, and then the plasma happens and fusion, burning plasma happens, and then they hope to achieve fusion. They have actually already demonstrated there's a burning plasma, and this is already inside, in a Nature paper published in 2022 January 26 January. You can see that. Okay, this is freely available. So this is one of the breakthrough, the opposite way of fusion, how to enhance, how to generate fusion energy from fusion through laser plasma fusion. One is magnetic fusion, and this is laser plasma. Okay. Now, of course, in January 2020, for the first time, burning plasma obtained, and as I have told you, this is already there in Nature paper, and you can see that this is the cutting edge technology in the world. Okay. Now, the one more very exciting plasma application in the present context is known as a plasma wake field accelerator. You know about particle accelerator. Particle accelerators are there for various purposes, for treating human beings, for treating cancer patients. High energy particles are being accelerated. They are being put onto the skin so that the cancerous tumor can be treated. Now there is something called plasma wave field acceleration, which is I'm on the finishing of my slides, and the plasma wave field acceleration is actually can be explained as something something like a plasma wave mechanism is being used by the and this wave is being used to accelerate particle to a very high energy within a very short distance. And normally the particle accelerators have a very huge framework because your particle have to be accelerated by using electromagnetic field over a long distance. This is the opposite of that. That means it's like a tabletop accelerator. It's like a very small device where the plasma wave is being used. Instead of using the electromagnetic field from the scratch, the people will try to use the plasma wave as an accelerating mechanism to accelerate the high energy particle to a very, very high velocity. And it's already demonstrated. The idea was actually, if you talk about the concept-wise, the concept is something very old. The principle involved to use high energetic plasma wave energy to accelerate charged particles. It was actually originally conceived by Toshiki Tajima, one of the pioneers in the plasma physics, and also John Dawson at UCLA, University of California, Los Angeles, in 1979. One of the Indian origin person, that is called Chandrasekhar Joshi, popularly known as a Chan Joshi, his first prototype was built at 1984 in UCLA. Now, this is the emerging source of, this is also published in the Nature, and this is the emerging source of technology where the plasma field is used to harness some of the some of the cutting edge technologies of the world. Now, I think I have come to it can be used to build the so-called tabletop accelerator. So I think I have come to the end. My time is almost up, and I have just given you a very, very brief review of the cutting edge plasma field research. But apart from that, I'm sure I have left many of these things. For example, plasma material science. But I am not an expert on that. But still, the plasma is also used very heavily nowadays in material science. For example, surface coating, hardening of the metal, and very many other plasma or disposal, waste disposal is a kind of things. But these are not like a cutting edge technology, but this is also developing. And I actually chosen to showcase the fusion scenario because this is what we need in the long-term future for the solving energy crisis. That's it for today, and thank you so much for your kind attention. Thank you very much, Dr. Borua.
Thank you, Professor Madhurya Prasad Bora, for enlightening us with this plasma technology and applications. I think plasma is going to play a very key role in our day-to-day life in future. Whenever we call about future technologies, it is not just artificial intelligence, big data, and all these things. These are already there. And in plasma technology also, all these things are going to play a role. But ultimately, the plasma is going to be answer to many of our day-to-day problems. And already in many areas like waste disposal, plasma technology is now giving a good solution.
Is already
As
being
you
used.
mentioned about Professor Dhiraj Bora. He
Yes,
started
they are
one
in their
plant
university. They have a
in
prototype.
plant in his university campus, but he could not see the light of the day. And
Yes.
where our science and technology, Assam has also sponsored the project.
Aztec is also associated. Yes.
Yeah. So I think very soon that project will be applicable application stage. Maybe in Guwahati we can have some kind of good experimentation on application of plasma technology for waste disposal.
Definitely.
So any one or two questions if we can have, or we can move on to the next presentation.
Definitely. I don't think there's any questions.
Okay. Now let us moving on to our last presentation by Dr. Manojit Ghosh. Dr. Manojit Ghosh is an assistant professor at the Department of Computer Science and Engineering, IIT Guwahati. Very young researchers and technologist. His research interests include machine learning, computer architecture, mobile edge computing, then NOC, PIM, and other areas of computer architects, operating systems. I think he will be as a young researcher and scientist in the field of computer science. All of us are waiting to listen to him about the new opportunities in the field of application of computers. It is over to Dr. Manojit Ghosh to deliver his speech. Dr. Ghosh.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Borua. Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay, all right. So let me just share my screen.
Sure. Yes, you are audible.
Okay, all right. So let me just share my screen.
Sure.
All right, is this visible? Hopefully, yes.
Yes, you can
Okay.
continue.
Yeah, thank you very much. And yes, so at the outset, I would like to thank and the Vigyan Utsav organizing committee and Aztec to be precise. And so I really, as you mentioned, yes, of course, as I was listening to the eminent scientists in the field of agriculture, in the field of plasma physics, and I was also listening to the keynote given by the Professor Das. And yes, so I am the younger one, or rather youngest one. So if I do a mistake, kindly bear with me and guide me in that process. All right. So having said that, basically, I am a assistant professor at IIIT Guwahati. So it's not IIT Guwahati. So I did my PhD from IIT Guwahati, and I'm working at IIIT Guwahati. Now, so this is the brief outline of my presentation. I'll be talking about the current computing system. I'll try to give a glimpse of the current scenario, and then, as we know that every invention is typically triggered by different bottlenecks that we encounter in the system design. So I'll be trying my best to give some of the bottlenecks in the current computing system design, and then some ways about rethinking that, how can we rethink, and what are the thoughts given by different scientists in this community. And then I'll be talking about recent buzzwords. As we all know, we heard a lot about AI, ML, big data, blockchain, and whatnot. So I'll be trying to give a glimpse of that from a computing perspective, and then finally I'll end my talk with giving some challenges and opportunities in this field. And to be honest, as the audience is a general one, so I'll not be going to deep inside, but I'll try my best to give the overview of the system. Now, to start with, so I don't need to say that we are surrounded by all types of computing systems. Whatever we say, whatever we assume, or rather, from our day-to-day life to a great computing station or a server which resides under the sea, whatever we say, it's about it. So underneath it is the computing system. Now, when you think a bit, basically these computing systems are designed either for a general purpose computation or performing general purpose thing. That's what we typically mean by computer. But computing systems is not limited to computer, as we already know. So nowadays people are talking about designing hardware to specifically performing some job, and we call it to be ASIC, application specific integrated circuit. And so that can be general purpose or that can be application specific. Now, typically what typically drives these systems, what we see, that all of you were, whatever we are seeing in the picture, we are seeing a part of the hardware, maybe from a user's perspective or from an insider's perspective, or rather an engineer's perspective, right? Now, what we do not see is the software, which plays an important role that typically runs the system. And it's not about the hardware and software, it is the rather more important thing is about the policies to drive them, to use them. And the policy includes designing from algorithm to management policies, and it resides in all the stack. So algorithm is not typically meant for a software engineer, rather it is because it is to be executed by the underlying hardware. So I'll just come to that. So essentially, for me, I would like to define the computing system as a combination of hardware, software, and the policies underneath. Now, it would be very unfair if I don't, show the picture of this great man who is none other than John von Neumann, who is the pioneer pioneer of the computing system design, who said that, and the primary principle of his design was to make the computing and the memory separate. Essentially, what I mean, naturally we'll have the computing device, because as the name says, computing system, so there has to have, it is quite natural to have a computing element inside it. So we have the computing element. Now, the question is, if you have a computing element, what will you compute? Essentially, we need to have some data, and that's what the data will be stored in memory. So in his design, he segregated this computing element and a memory in both, in different ways. So there should be two individual entities for that. And then, in order to, if you process something, if you use the data, if you produce some result, essentially there has to have some storage for the long time, because we'd be interested to use those things for a later point of time. So that has driven to something called memory, again in a secondary context. And then finally, the interconnection that plays another important role in order to do the operations that we typically do by the computing system. So this is a general, this is a recent diagram of a motherboard. Many of you might be aware of seeing that the CPU resides somewhere here, and then the memory chips are placed somewhere here, and these are LAN ports and other things. But the point is, this is an interesting diagram. It says we have the user and we have the system with us. So essentially, whatever we do, we typically interact with the system, be it driving the automated car, or be it our desktop computer, or whatever computation we talk about, or be it in order to learning a machine learning algorithm or AI algorithm, so as to estimate or so as to predict the quality of crops, whatever we talk about. So essentially, we have a user base and we have a system. Now the user interacts with the system. Now let us think for a while what happens inside the system. Now, when you say user, so user typically has something to do, and user submits his or her job to the system. Now, in whatever way, it might be through text, it might be typical way. Earlier days, it was used to be using the magnetic tap or the punch card, to be precise. Now we talk about natural language processing, so we'll be just talking, and the system is expected to understand that. See how complex the job of a system. We also need to think from that perspective. So essentially, what happens? We give something to the computer, and it is essentially, in our term, we call it a problem is given to the computer. Now see, think for a while, we are just listening to a physicist. Yes, so they are the backbone. They reside somewhere here in the bottommost layer of the computing stack. So when you talk about a system, it typically runs in electricity, using the electricity. So essentially, if we go one level above, it is a matter of 0 and 1. So a machine which understands only 0 and 1, with the help of something, we are able to make it understand. We are able to design that it understands 0 and 1s. Now think for a while, we are not giving in 0 and 1, we are giving input in all together in different domains or different ways. Now so essentially, it has to traverse all through completing this stack, and then the result is computed over here using the electrical signals, and it has to traverse back to the user in a way which is acceptable to it, or he or she should be pleased to see the result the way it was expected. Now, what happens inside? When you get a problem, as a designer's perspective, we need to design, or we need to build something so as to solve that problem, be it simple addition, to be it moving the robotic arm, whatever it is. Now we need to design the system, we need to design the algorithm, keeping this in mind that we have a system like this, and the system understands certain things. So by understanding, if we again go back in other way, so when you have the CPU over here, that portion I kept it to be highlighted so as to tell that this is essentially the brain, or rather the heart of our system. So it has to understand. Now we need to design in such a way that it is understood by this particular entity, and it performs certain job. Now there comes a series of operations everyone does is respective jobs, be it the algorithm design, be it writing converting that algorithm to the program in whatever programming languages we use, and then that programming language has to pass through something called operating system, and then operating system typically communicates with hardware. But again, when you get inside a bit, the hardware understands something called assembly language. If you might be aware of that. So assembly language talks about, let's say, instead of saying 0 and 1 pattern, it is easier for the user, if we express in these terms, let's say add A, B, remember, we are not saying A equal to B plus C. We are something writing that add A, B, C. This comes at the assembly level. So again, this has to be converted to that, and then the assembly level thing is taken by the hardware, and then the journey continues. Now, when you talk about a future technology, we can think about development or other developing technologies across these computing stack. We may wish to have, as I said, that we might be interested to give our input in natural language. We might be, the scientists are working on the algorithm design. Scientists are working to have a better programming paradigm, because many of you, those were especially the senior persons, you must be you must be aware of Fortran, COBOL. So those were the days, right? And there's now we are talking about say Python, C++, Java, and then beyond that Go, and then R programming language, and then the programming paradigm has also changed. Nowadays we are talking about OpenMP, MPI, right? So there is an option to do at every computing stack, and the efforts are being done accordingly. Now, so these are typically, if we say inventions in the computing system, so typically these are driven by the incremental approach, the bottlenecks, and sometimes driven by the application requirement also, we'll see. And then if we talk about the invention in the computing system, so as I said, individual components or the invention can be in order to improve the overall performance of the system in terms of execution time, that we typically mean. But there are a lot of other metrics which is there beyond execution time, as far as whenever environment or nature is concerned, because we are giving a talk which talks about which was name is the environment word is there. So we need to care about that. Of course, we need to care about that. So it is about energy consumption. It is about green computing. It is about so as I said, so the optimization goal of these systems also changed accordingly as the time progresses. Now, so this is an interesting diagram which talks about the generations of hardware or the computer, the CPU to be precise. So we see that initially, so this is one break-even point. Initially, the performance of the systems were improved by increasing the clock rate. So the clock rate, in a sense, the frequency at which the operation will be performed. But we reached to a point that it generates excessive heat. And not only the heat requires cooling cost, so there is a cost involved. Not only that, when you have excessive heat, the integrated circuit or the IC cannot perform well. And it is reported that with certain degree in increasing the temperature, the failure rate of the circuit goes down. So there is a point, and people started looking at different angle. So then the effort was to make multi-processor system instead of having a single processor. And accordingly, a lot of things had to change. We need to think from parallel programming, because the human being thinks sequentially. We see, we'll do this work, that work, and other. Even today's also, we are designed, our students are designed, or other, we are designed to design things, design programs, write programs in a sequential manner. But that will not, the underlying system doesn't do that. And why we are still doing that? Because the parallel programming paradigm is not the rich enough, is not saturated. So still we are writing in a sequential way, and as a human being we think sequentially, write sequentially. There comes the job of the compiler designer to convert our program to parallel one, so that it can get executed in a system called, in a parallel system. Now, going forward, next bottleneck was in the integrated circuit itself. So we see that the off-chip communication or other off-chip or on-chip communication takes a lot of time, right? Especially the chips were designed in two-dimensional. Now there comes a point that the design shift has changed from 2D to 3D, and then accordingly three-dimensional chips were being produced. But yes, this is one such chip, one such product from NVIDIA. Yeah, so I remember here I have used, the images from different places. I tried to, give them in the references. So, my humble thing is that I'm so many of the diagrams I have taken from different sources, and I am not advocating any industry as such, because I'll be displaying few products from different companies, Intel, Nvidia, Micron, and whatever. So it's not about advocating any company. Yeah, that was the disclaimer. So this was the first chip. They claimed to be the world first media processor, so which actually a 3D chip. But still, today's commercial processors are not built in that scale. So essentially, we need to do a lot of work so as to bring the 3D thing into the reality, because 3D produces, again, in 3D, you can see that the heat sink is at the bottom layer, and cores are placed on top of another, right? Now, when you execute something on the core, it produces, because it is essentially a CMOS, so it produces heat. Now, again, if the heat crosses a certain level, so it cannot perform well. So we cannot place, so we need to place another heat sink layer over here, and there are a lot of things we need to do. So as a result of that, and so it is not still commonplace in the market, but we are hopeful that we are moving in a direction where future is, of course, 3D as far as semiconductor devices are concerned. Now, moving ahead, this is another rather bottleneck called the memory wall. See, till now, the point is we are headed by a processor-centric design. So that means whenever processor requires something, it will send a request to the memory, and accordingly memory will do something, get the data from somewhere, wherever it is there, and then get back the result, right? With, of course, different layers in it. You may not get it in the primary memory. I'm not going to that details because of lack of time. Now, essentially, the design was processor-centric. Now, what can you do? Because processor-centric designs are not suitable for current type of applications, and there and we can see that there's a lot of performance gap that comes as far as the history is concerned. So we spend a lot of time in order to improve the performance of our system, but we paid less attention in developing the memory system. But think about today's applications, all are data driven applications. So we talk about data, a lot of data, how to process those data. It's enormous amount of data. Now, if you bring everything from memory, there is a bottleneck, and we typically call it to be von Neumann bottleneck. Though he was the pioneer, now people are thinking about changing the paradigm completely to come out from the von Neumann bottleneck and to go towards a data-centric approach. Now, so these are some of the ways of the data-centric approach. I'll briefly touch upon a few of them. So one thing was to introduce a layers of cache memories. Now, if you purchase a system, any system, you might be, if you're interested, you can see the system configuration. You might see that 2 MB L3 cache. So what are those? Nothing but those are the size of these cache faster memories, because memory happens to be slow, right? And a lot of them placed inside in the same chip as that of the processor, and typically the last level is kept outside the chip. It is just to meet the trade-off of cost and chip area. So this is one such picture. You can see there are several cores are there. These are multi-core processor. We already talked about, and then this happens to be the DRAM. Now there is again another bottleneck, because whenever we do a off chip, so design have come up to place multiple banks of these DRAMs one after another, and we call it to be 3D stacked DRAM. And see, again, there are some products available in that domain as well. Now, moving ahead, when you talk about data-centric approach, so ideally, So data is to travel, as we say, it has to travel from storage to the computing, as it is happening in today's system, whatever system we are using, right? Be it i5, i7, or i9, whatever we say, or in terms of AMD's Ryzen. But the question is, the paradigm is shaped. The paradigm is shifted rather. So at the left side we have this approach where we have CPU data comes this way, but at the other side, right side, we have an approach where the processing elements by PU means processing units will be placed with the memories. Now, when it placed with these, the RAM, the primary memory, we call it to be processing in memory. When you placed with the storage, we call it to be in storage computation, ISC. And as I said, that all the recent applications are highly expected to get benefit out of these. And a few recent products, are coming, but still they are not rich. A lot of research is to be there, lot of opportunities are there to bring the memory and computation together, because this is one side of the picture. There are a lot of challenges in order to bring the computation, right? Again, all right. So next, we move towards, how much time do I have? I guess 10 minutes or so, if I take that. We move towards, how much time do I have? I guess 10 minutes or so. Okay. So let's say when you talk about 3D stack DRAM, another way to handle the bottleneck is about to use this DRAM layer after layer on top of layer. At the same time, we place a logic layers. That's what we talked about. So this logic layer is nothing but performs some small computations, right? And we see many times, if you have a bit of machine learning knowledge, you see that a lot of the operations are simple linear combinations of, so essentially it is scalar computations and then some linear combinations of that. So we need to do a lot of scalar computations, right? And there are some things and some computations, let's say copy, we often do copy from one place to another, right? So this doesn't typically require much of the CPU power or other sophisticated CPU. So why can't we? Yeah, I guess my how much time do I have?
Actually, you have to conclude. It is already one part. Okay, now you can continue about 2-3 minutes and you can conclude, please.
How much time do I have? Okay, so I'll take 5 more minutes. Then I'll
Actually, you have
conclude.
to conclude. It is already one part.
Right. So okay, let's not go to the details, depth of that. Then I will be giving. Let's say these are some of the. So I'll just quickly rush through the things, and I'll try to give a glimpse of the system. So this is another way where today's systems are built on volatile memories. By volatile means when power is off, whatever is there in the RAM will be vanished, because this uses capacitor-based techniques. Now people are also talking about non-volatile memories because of the bottlenecks given by the DRAM, right? So these are some of the products that comes, but still there are a lot of opportunities, as I said. So especially as it is mentioned over here that these memories are having specific characteristics. And when we talk about non-volatile memory, the write endurance or the number of writes the memory can support is limited by a factor, is less. So but when it depends upon the user can do a lot of things and can perform several writes. So how do you figure which are the things that are more likely to be written, and what are the data that are less that will be read driven? So accordingly we can take help of these memories so as to overcome this challenge. Another interesting one is rather this picture talks about another direction where computing, we are taking computing towards so it is about utility service. So nowadays we don't we don't rather wish to own the computing facility because of several reasons: maintenance cost, legacy software, and others. So when you say computing as a utility, here comes the picture of cloud computing, here comes the picture of mobile edge computing, here comes the picture of mobile cloud computing. And so essentially user will submit the job to something we don't know where, and there will be underlying system, and the underlying system will perform the job so as to get back the result. And this is one such technology that typically drives the cloud computing or other utility service, is the virtualization technology, right? And then of course, so we can find that it has applications in various ways. Now when you talk about people interested in machine learning, I won't be talking much about here. I will just give a brief thing about the machine learning. As we know that we all are using AI based techniques. So there are two ways when you club AI with computing system. One is AI was typically coined long back, but it was not so popular. So do you know why? It is mainly because of the hardware. The hardware was not at par so as to do that complex operations. Nowadays we are there with, we have GPU and accelerators so as to do that work, and we are still heading towards designing computing systems so as to do the ML applications in a faster way. Another thing of where we can associate ML in the computing system is about using the ML approach itself in designing the computing system. So that is something interesting. Now, yeah, so I'll not be talking much. If you're interested, I'll be sharing my contact details. You can reach me. So these are typically driven by the recent applications. Yeah, now we are heading, we started our journey with the vacuum tubes. We are still there. We are exploiting the silicon technology to the greatest possible extent. Then we are heading towards the DNA computing. This is a prototype computer. They're still in research phase. So hopefully in future we can see that. And this is another domain that talks about quantum computing, where instead of using these the silicon technology, can we use the quantum bit? The physicists can elaborate on that. So we will be using qubit, and the superposition of that qubit will give us the value, right? Whether we talk about 0 or 1 or something in between 0 and 1. So it is said that it has a huge potential to solve some of the classical problems in computing domain, right? Again, we need to face a lot of things as far as the whole computing stack is concerned. And people are also talking about, as quantum computer, managing quantum computer is very difficult. So people are also talking about having it a cloud service where quantum computing can be used as a service. So finally, some of the challenges I'll be just talking about. As I said, when you design something, there are a lot of opportunities in almost every stack, from the topmost to the bottommost layer. And then, so computing system has a great role to play in basic human needs as well as in the animal welfare also. So we are particularly working to design a system in animal welfare. So currently my research is centered around this. All right, now the last thing that we need to think about, or we need to care about, is how do we handle these smart devices. These are very, very important as for the students, for the community at large, and for the elderly people. The computing system has provided enormous facilities and enormous power. So it depends on us, how do you use that, because there is a concept called intermittent attention. It takes out our privacy and security. So we should keep that in our mind so as to deal with these computing systems. Another thing is the data and the misleading of the data. The intranet is filled with a lot of data. Now it depends on us, which one shall we pick up and which one shall we not. So that comes another questions, and we need to be ready to equip ourselves for the industry 5.0, where human being and the machines will work together so as to perform a job. So these are some of the social challenges. With these, I end my talk. So if there is any questions, these are some of the references. If there is any question, you can ask or you can mail me. With these, I end my talk. So if there is any questions, these are some of the references. If there is any question, and I'm sorry, I just overshooted the time.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Manojit Ghosh. You have touched upon almost all the aspects of computing systems and its applications in our life in future, and also we are already having applications. We have touched upon the application of computing system in animal welfare, healthcare, agriculture, and other sectors. And we are very happy to know that you are already working on this application of computing system in animal welfare. We'll be looking forward to have a more deeper presentation among technical groups from you, so that as a State Council of Science and Technology, we can take your support, technical support in taking up some good programs on computing system. We actually look forward to have a research mission, a technology mission in Assam. And your inputs will be of immense help for us. Thank you very much. Not much time left. If anyone wants to ask any question, thank you very much. And you can interact with Dr. Manojit Ghosh. His contact details you can find in his website also, and his email ID is given. So, today, actually, we have missed the presence of our respected director, Madam Kimni Changshan. Because of our some health issues, she could not present here, so we could not have her inputs in the beginning of this. Because of some health issues, she could not present here, so we could not address. So have her in the beginning of this. So, but she guided us in organizing this webinar on behalf of all the organizers. I thank her. So now it is over to Mr. Siddhartha Devnath, scientist from the Pattern Information Cell Stack, to offer the vote of thanks.
Yeah, it will be my honor and pleasure to be a part of Aztec in the near future.
Sure,
I'm looking forward to that.
We look forward.
Thank you. Yeah, it will be my honor.
Siddharth, please.
Thank you, sir. Honorable dignitaries, speakers, organizers, hosts, and participants, I thank you all for giving me this opportunity to express my gratitude on this event. Today we have celebrated Vigyan Utsav as a part of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav with the theme Future Technologies. More than 70 participants are present in this event. On behalf of Assam Science, Technology and Environment Council, I express my heartfelt thanks to Dr. Joydeep Bora, Head, Science and Technology Division Aztec, for the detailed introduction of the webinar and conducting the webinar along with hosting. Next, Professor A.K. Das, Director, IIIT Imphal and Professor of IIT Guwahati, for his keynote address regarding ATMs, income tax, blockchain, virtual reality, 3D printing, green technologies, etc. Next, Dr. Vidyut Kumar Sharma, Professor, Assam Agricultural University. We thank him for his lecture on biotech interventions, genome engineering regarding genetically modified crops, also known as biocrops, and his work on the chickpeas. That was very interesting, along with other information. And then next speaker, Professor Madhurya P. Bora, who is a professor from Physics Department, Guwahati University, and also Director of IQAC, Guwahati University, for his wonderful presentation on plasma fusion, also the features of how plasma technologies can be used for energy purposes. And our final speaker, Dr. Manojit Ghosh, which is an assistant professor from IIIT Guwahati, for his wonderful presentation on computing systems, including human bottleneck from history of computing, 3D chips, evolution of microprocessors. Finally, I thank the organizers, hosts, participants, and the representatives and officials of Aztec, along with other state councils, and Department of Science and Technology of India for making this event a success. Thank you, everyone. Along with other state councils and Department of Science and Technology of India for making this event a success. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Thank you, Siddhartha. With this, we conclude this month's session of Vigyan Utsav. Next month we are coming back with a new theme. We expect participation of all the participants today. And thank you very much. We are coming back with a new theme. We expect participation of all the participants today. And thank you very much. We are coming back with a new theme. We expect participation of all the participants today. And thank you very much.